Good afternoon, and thank you again to the team at Modern Treasury for what's already been a fascinating and thought-provoking day. It's my honor to be hosting 3 exceptional panelists for this session on the implications of artificial intelligence for the fintech industry. I will be joined by 3 panelists. First, Modern Treasury's very own Erica Libby. Erica leads Modern Treasury's initiatives on data and enterprise readiness, prior to which she was the head of growth at PayPal and Venmo. Second, we'll be joined by Seema Amble. Seema is a partner at Andreessen Horowitz, where she focuses her time investing in early-stage companies in SaaS and B2B fintech. And thirdly, we'll be joined by Jenny Johnston from the API team at OpenAI. Prior to OpenAI, she spent a decade in the fintech and payments worlds, including, most importantly, as an early employee at Modern Treasury. So with that, please join me for a very warm welcome to our 3 panelists. Jenny, Seema, Erica, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're living through a wave of unprecedented enthusiasm about generative AI and its implications for individuals, companies, and governments across the world. Nowhere is that enthusiasm more palpable than here in the Bay Area, and I'm sure there are multiple people in this audience who are prioritizing, and if not prioritizing, then spending a great deal of time thinking about the implications of AI for the fintech sector. So, Jenny, I'd love to start with your perspectives on this question. Is Gen AI revolutionary for fintech, or is it overhyped?
Ooh. I'm biased. So I actually think it's probably underhyped right now within the world of fintech. If you think about the first commercial use case of AI back in the 90s, it was for digital check processing. So AI and fintech have gone together pretty much from the earliest days. Today, we're already seeing a tremendous growth and adoption within financial services broadly, both for fintechs as well as traditional financial services companies, embedding fintech not only in internal workflows from a massive productivity gain, but also thinking about ways they could be embedding AI, like Modern Treasury is doing, from an external product perspective. So I think we're in the earliest innings. There's a ton more to do, and I couldn't be more excited about where we are today and how much more is left to come.
Seema, do you share Jenny's excitement and enthusiasm? And I'd love your thoughts on whether there are any idiosyncratic features of the fintech sector that make it more or less likely to be a big beneficiary of AI.
Sure. I couldn't be a venture capitalist in today's world if I wasn't, also very excited about AI and the potential. Yeah, I think fintech is a really interesting field for AI to be applied in, and has been, because I think there are actually a lot of things, a couple of characteristics that make it super compelling, and then other areas which make it just a little bit harder to adopt, but I think surmountable. On the areas that make fintech particularly compelling, like, look, you've got a lot of manual, repetitive work, a lot of people employed doing that work instead of the more strategic work. You have a lot of data that's fragmented across a lot of different sources. I know a theme today is reconciliation. Like, there's a lot around what fintech can do. And it's not just in, we talk a lot here about payments, but think about, banks that employ a ton of people on the compliance side, or in call centers doing customer success. Financial services has a lot of these great characteristics. On the other side, however, everything we've seen with Gen AI around hallucinations and accuracy, you can't afford to mess up the numbers on a ledger or what's showing up in people's bank accounts. So accuracy matters a ton, as we all know. And in general, I think right now where Gen AI sits, it's very good at parsing language, generating images, but math is not its strong suit, just given the way the models are set up. And so calculations aren't necessarily great fits for Gen AI. And then I think overall, just in fintech, with any new software, right, you have a skeptical buyer who has limited budget, And so like, it's always a little bit more of, it takes more convincing around ROI and trust. But I think on the flip side, like this buyer has often not had, engineering resources, and AI can help really bridge that gap, because now instead of needing the engineer to go build out all the integrations, you're able to use software to do that.
I'm going to pick on that point later because it's so interesting. But for now, Erica, we've heard from the other two panelists that there's a great deal of opportunity for AI in fintech, and we've heard from several of your colleagues today about the ways that modern Treasury is leveraging AI. I wonder if you could bring that together for us. How is a company like modern Treasury deploying AI today, and what do you see as the most compelling use cases?
Yeah, I think, well, for modern Treasury, getting and involving AI in our product has been a very thoughtful process over the last 6-12 months, where we've really been spending time trying to understand which of the pieces of our customers' problems can actually be solved with AI, and how can we do that effectively and safely and in the right ways. And so I think when we've sort of looked at those opportunities and we've said, where can we play, where can we bring AI to really bring value? And I think, obviously, as shown this morning in the demo, I think the first area is really, how can we streamline our customers' workflows? How can we make their workflows easier? How can we take away as many steps as possible, similar to what Seema was saying about all these manual things that people have had to do forever? Can we streamline that? Can we sort of give them an assistant or I don't want to say friend, because that's a little bit extreme, but someone to sort of help them along through that workflow? And you see that with the recon rule suggestions, the data mapping, things like that. I think the other place that we're really seeing it be helpful is also just internally, is saying, how can we leverage this to help our teammates access information faster and more effectively? And so that's things like, our bank integrations are exceptionally complex. We have so many of them with so many, as Sam talked about earlier, currencies and countries and rails. And so, when we need to know, remind me, what's the cutoff time for this bank with this customer in this geography, we now have that information at sort of our fingertips. And I think the last piece that we're still sort of in the early stages of understanding is, how can we use this as we think about, bringing more data and more data sources for our customers into modern Treasury to do reconciliation? How can AI help us with the processing, the transformation, the ingestion of all of those disparate data sources that we saw in that little diagram earlier this morning? So I think those are kind of the places that we're really sort of leaning forward and leaning in, but it's that constant focus on, where can this help our customers and their problems, or where can it help us internally?
So clearly, modern Treasury is implementing a comprehensive set of advantages from AI. Seema, I'd be interested in your thoughts on whether this maps to what you're seeing elsewhere in fintech. What are the most interesting implementations that you've seen to date, and does that map to some of the things Erica was talking about?
Yeah, no, it does. And to summarize, I think two of the trends that Erica's pointing out that we're seeing are, research co-pilots, or broadly, workflow, these sort of companions to the, the employee around, like looking things up, So being able to more easily search through data, whether it's around payments, it's a compliance officer at a bank, anything around, an investment analyst being able to search through a filing more easily. So that's one broad theme. And then a second theme that Erica touched on is workflow automation. And that could be extracting things out of documents, that could be pulling in API data, it can be anything that historically, again, was really more manual, or even maybe OCR was being leveraged before, and now an LLM can power OCR, making it much more powerful. And that's like another, I'd say, broad trend. And there's a number of applications, again, within fintech, whether it's, again, like accounts receivable or payments or compliance. I'd say the other two areas, which I touched on earlier, voice is actually a really interesting application of AI right now, and in financial services, JP Morgan employs thousands of people in their call centers. How do you make those folks more efficient, triage more easily now using the voice tools available? That's a huge use case. And I touched on compliance earlier. What does that mean? That's everything from like parsing documents and filing suspicious activity reports, which used to take like hours of manual work, and being able to do that more easily. And also to like anything else around, again, like identifying discrepancies, which ties back in with the reconciliation theme, but it's sort of, you see it across different uses within fintech. So I think those themes definitely broadly map and can be applied against other areas within fintech as well.
Now, before a fintech or indeed another company can start to benefit from some of the things that you both laid out, they have to architect an AI strategy. So let's take a little bit of a step higher level, and Jenny, bring you back in here. What are the key factors that a company should consider as they start to think about architecting an AI strategy? And what are the key strategic and operational decisions or trade-offs that they'll have to make in building it?
Sure. Yeah, it's amazing how often we have customers come to us and say, my board has told me to get AI, or my CEO has told me to get AI, and I'm a CTO or I'm a CPO or a CFO. And we say, great, what does that mean? And just like with anything, you need to start with a business case. And typically how we walk people through that is you got to think about people, you got to think about process, and then you have to think about technology. So in any form of business case, anytime you're making some form of technology decision, you have to be thinking about what is the goal? Do you have clear KPIs around that goal? What resources do I have to bring to bear to achieve that goal? And what's my timeline? And then from there, you're going to talk about process, right? Am I building this? Am I buying this? Am I partnering with this? Just like you might think about that for payment operations, right? You have a whole bunch of options of building directly into a bank, working with somebody like a modern treasury. There's no one size fits all. And what matters is that you are evaluating, and I think being very realistic with yourself about how much resources you have to put to bear and how critical this is to your use case. Where we see people really winning within this space is when you have senior level championship, where it starts at the top and people feel emboldened and empowered to use the tools that most likely they're already using. 80% of Fortune 500 company employees are already using ChatGPT, whether you know it or not. So it's already happening, and we see both this top-down and this bottoms-up being a really powerful play when you start to define and scope what that use case is going to be. And then you have to think about the technology piece, right? If you're thinking about building, it's really complicated to think about the models that exist out there. I know Eric and I were lamenting about this as Modern Treasury is making that decision. Do you go with an open source model and fine-tune that to yourself? Do you go with a foundational model like OpenAI and more of a platform approach? There's trade-offs to both of these. And again, you're thinking about balancing performance, you're thinking about latency, you're thinking about cost. Typically, the best way to get started is just by starting to get honest with yourself about what questions you have and starting to have the conversation. Us at OpenAI, my role is fundamentally to talk with people like you. Many of our customers are actually in the audience, so hi, hello, thank you for coming. Please come see me afterwards for happy hour and say hi in person. And just having these really honest dialogues about how you get up that really like AI maturity curve. So the moral is there's no one size fits all. But you got to get going. You got to start asking these questions, and there will be a place for you. It just depends upon what you need and why.
Yeah. Erica, how have you approached these trade-offs at Modern Treasury?
And I think, like you said it exactly right. It's that constant question of sort of speed, latency, accuracy. All of those things are so critical, especially when you're thinking about your customer use case. But I think there's a couple things that we've done, which I think have been really valuable, going to Jenny's point about just starting, is like, just putting some people to spend their whole days playing is sort of a strong word, but experimenting is maybe the right word, with AI in the context of your application. And their sole purpose is to spend that time and to think about it and understand it and try different things and different use cases. And I think that's been really successful for us in finding pieces that both we've heard from customers, but that actually line up, to your point, with where we are in our AI journey and how we can get started. And so I think that's one thing. I think the other thing that is obviously like critical, and I think Dimitri mentioned this earlier, is understanding your customers, their risk profile, what type of data you're dealing with, what compliance or legal or other requirements that may exist. And then, you may sort of find yourself leaning in towards, certain structures, like, models that you work off of on Bedrock because AWS is already what you're using and they're a sub-processor and you feel comfortable with that, versus other places where you might say, I want to, build something from the ground up. So I think for us, it's really been about that experimentation mindset and not being afraid to just sort of, take some engineers and have them go spend their days thinking about it and playing with it and finding the opportunities, and then also having a little more structure around, okay, now that we've done that and we've seen some opportunities, which are really the right ones for us to go take advantage of.
Jenny, you talked about the need to be quite honest in your assessment of where you are and what that means for your potential to deploy AI. And Erica, clearly today, Modern Treasury has showcased the enthusiasm of the organization around AI and, of course, the technological capabilities. Seema, you see so many companies across this ecosystem. What are the key attributes of businesses that are most likely to benefit from this technological wave?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question because I think there's two pieces of this and ways to think about it. One is the basic recipe for company building hasn't totally changed. So especially I look at SaaS, B2B software, getting go-to-market down and understanding workflow and buyer, how the buyer use case, that's all still the same. And I think that's still really, really important. I want to underscore that. I think on the other piece, I think a lot of what's compelling, usually is either you can find a compelling wedge that, again, if their company is like, oh, we got to use AI, but it's actually solving a quick pain point, or it's quickly solving a pain point, and that magic is there really quickly. So a lot of the voice stuff that we've seen is really magical, right? All of a sudden you're able to, impersonate on the bad side, but also, replicate customer success conversation quite easily or over text is important. And I think that wedge can be magical. I think the other piece is also often, you're bringing together data, and if you are a company that sits on top of a lot of data, so as an incumbent, or you're able to pull together data quickly as a newer startup, that's another area that I think can be valuable. I think the other thing to keep in mind, though, is we often talk as VCs that cost of creation is going to zero. I think that we're entering a world in which competition is increasing quite a bit because it's so much easier to spin up these companies. And so bucket one around really getting go-to-market down and workflows is true more than ever. And then I'd say and also the other piece about company building is how are you going to be differentiated in the long run? But those are all, classic company building themes.
And can I jump in there quickly? I think every company can benefit from AI. Everyone in this audience has some part of their job that sucks, that is rote, that is boring, that would benefit greatly from an army of the smartest interns that you've ever had at your fingertips. That is what ChatGPT is. That is what some of these internal productivity tools with AI can do. They're fabulous for work streams like compliance or elements where, filing a SARS report is very unhuman, right? Think about being able to actually automate that and then unlocking the human capital that exists inside of your company for so many more creative, productive, actually true value creation sides of your business. There are things that are really important that need to get done, but every company has something internally that could be run better, faster, cheaper than it is today. And then you start thinking about those magical multimodality experiences that can come, like what Modern Treasury is doing, where you embed this in a product experience, and that opens up a whole new world where, wearing my legacy investor hat, you're always saying, well, how do you drive up revenue and cut costs? And that's the secret equation. AI can actually help you do that. So I think everyone has a role for AI inside of their company. It just depends on your goal.
And I think the other piece on the internal side, going back to my sort of comment around experimentation, I think if you're a company who's new to AI or maybe in a legacy space and is a little more uncomfortable with the technology and is maybe even concerned that your end customers will be uncomfortable with the technology, focusing on internal use cases is such a great place to sort of get exposure, understand the capabilities, and really build the muscle around what are the types of people we need to do this successfully. What are the technological tools that we need to do this successfully? What kind of data do we need? And so if you can train that muscle, obviously for your customers to generate revenue or do things like that, that's great. But every company is at a different part of their journey, and I think the internal use cases is such a unique way to to get started.
Yeah, and I think bringing it full circle, like I totally agree with Jenny. Like, yeah, 80% of employees are using these tools already. So if you're thinking about it from my perspective, which is investing in like new companies that are being built, it's these new companies are often starting with a co-pilot or starting with something that looks very much like ChatGPT, and then taking that and saying, okay, how do I turn it from a very consumerized use case on the B2B side and turning it into like a company from there. But it is very exciting because a lot of employees already are excited and using AI in either at work without necessarily being officially sanctioned software, or in their personal lives or whatever it is. So there's this familiarity and excitement that exists already.
Multiple threads to pull on here. You mentioned the huge competition that's coming as a result of this. You said that every company can be a beneficiary of AI. Erica, in your role at Modern Treasury, does this mean that you have to implement very, very fast, or do you go at your own pace?
So I think as Alex mentioned, I used to work at Venmo, and I think one of the things that I think about with AI is I think about it's like mobile first was 15 years ago. And so I think it's not really as much about speed as much as it is every time you're thinking about what you're building, are you envisioning how rapid improvements in AI will impact this product that you're building 6 months from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now. And so if you have that mindset and that awareness, you don't end up like Blockbuster, right? You sort of are able to have that vision. And that doesn't necessarily mean that everything you build today will involve AI and that you need to include it in every single piece of your infrastructure, and every product must have some call to OpenAI at some point in it. But it does mean that as you're making strategic decisions, as you're building your product, that piece of perspective is in every single decision that you're making. And so I do think it's valuable to get ahead of that piece as quickly as possible, and then also really, I think maybe the last piece, and this is something that Seema just said, which she was talking about how all these employees are using it, people are using it. It's like, this is also something that if you're not moving on, at least in terms of your strategy and thought process, you're going to lose out on customers, on talent who want to come work for you because this is how they see the future. And so I think that's kind of, speed is important, but it's speed in the kind of intellectual mindset way, and not necessarily in the deployment of code way.
So it's more about agility.
Yes.
And agility, I suppose, alongside the right data structures and processes. But isn't it also about scale and resources? Several of the large institutions have a huge number of people working on this, billions of dollars spent against it. The requirements to spend on compute are very high. Seema, I want to bring you back in here. How do you think about how this impacts the competitive landscape? Will it be the large incumbents that benefit, or the agile disruptors, or can it be either?
Yeah, look, I think, to put it shortly, I think it could be either. Both sides have their advantages, which are again, classic startup debates, which is, the incumbents have the data and the distribution, and the innovation and the speed and agility is coming from the startups. And we've seen this started to play out in a number of fields, like take case text versus Harvey in the legal field. And case text had all the data, right, and the distribution already, and they built that up over time. They started accelerating in growth, and then Harvey was building the tech, and there's a number of other legal tech startups as well. And so I think both sides can bear or can be successful. I think going back to this whole company building piece, it's, are you building products that people want, and are you able to get distribution? And then I think the other thing is, in this competitive sphere, I think a lot of times a co-pilot can be a really interesting wedge, but then getting into the workflow, being more embedded and sticky, whether that means also even we talk a lot about agents. So is the next step from co-pilot to, actually automating parts of the work? And then, what does that look like in the future? But I think we're at a really early stage of understanding how all this plays out. And, I think there'll be a lot of competition, but I think the folks who are able to nail that user experience are the ones that'll take off.
Jenny, I'd love your perspective on this matter. And do you think AI will drive fragmentation. You mentioned that there are now so many companies that can benefit because of the architecture built by a company like OpenAI.
It's hard to have a crystal ball. I think if you're adopting this, you will benefit. If you're not adopting this, you will be left behind. The models that we have right now are the dumbest the models will ever be. So if you have not started playing around, and I actually really love the word play, because most of these models today, particularly if you have a small team of engineers that you want to empower, it's self-serve, your data is not being trained on if you are in an enterprise API capacity, and you really just get to play and like have an opportunity to discover some form of internal or external use case that might transform your business in a way that you didn't realize that you even had possible to you today. So it's really hard to say. I don't have a crystal ball on where, is it going to be the incumbents that win? Is it going to be the small startups that take over? I've been amazed at the speed that some of the large financial institutions have moved on AI. Morgan Stanley has deployed a co-pilot, talk about human in the loop, incredibly important, particularly to get things right with customers, to 97% of their wealth managers. It is driving tremendous NPS for that side of their business and is unlocking the ability for them to cover more customers and more customers better, and it's driving revenue and is driving down costs. Again, like that magic equation we've been trying to unlock forever. So it's really hard to say. I'm a David and Goliath, going for David in startups, really wanting to see all the builders in this room like take over and transform. Competition is increasing, and so you got to get going.
So let's think about what those future models can do, and let's cast our eye in the last few minutes here into the future. Erica, you laid out all the ways that modern Treasury's leveraging AI today. If you take your eye forward 5, 10 years, how do you think fintech companies will be best using AI?
Well, I should start investing if any of this is right, but take Seema's job. I think there's a couple places that like really excite me. I think one is payment routing. I mean, there's so many payment rails, there's so many capabilities. We're seeing so many different ways for money to move, from everything from ledger-based payments like Venmo to credit cards to debit cards, all that kind of stuff. And helping institutions be smart and people be smart about how we use all these things effectively to minimize costs, to improve user experience, and to minimize, fraud and losses and all of those kinds of things that are really like the crux of what handicaps so many fintech companies is all of those things that go wrong, and how can we move away from going wrong. So that's something maybe a little niche, but that I'm like pretty excited about in the space. But yeah, I think there's just so much opportunity to figure out, patterns from the mountains of data that exist from transactions, and also use that to give consumers like better experiences that we're just not doing today. And so that kind of really excites me as well. I wish I had something fun, like maybe how can I use my like credit card rewards more effectively, because right now it's really hard, something like that. But maybe I can do that already today.
Jenny, key bottlenecks in order to get from here to there, and anything you'd add in terms of what's exciting for fintech?
Ooh, I'll go back to the be honest piece. If you haven't started, be honest about why. Behavior change is real in this space. People are afraid of what it would mean to automate away their jobs, and I think fundamentally I'm most excited about what it is to actually give people's jobs back to them. Get away from that rote manual work that truly a machine could do and maybe do even better than you, and get back to doing what really actually makes you human. Something I'm really excited about, and that's a harder conversation to have with senior management sometimes than there's actually a regulatory blocker put in place. I personally, I'm a payments nerd at heart, so I feel very welcomed back here. RTP and FedNow, the ISO 20022 protocol with what you can do with unstructured data tied to structured data with payments is the amazing merriment of traditional AI and ML that's already been powerful within fintech, with the possibilities of unstructured data with Gen AI. I'm really excited about what that could do, particularly from a fraud fighting perspective.
Seema, last word goes to you. What are you most excited about in terms of the future of AI?
Yeah, look, I mean, everything that I just laid out in terms of a whole new generation of software, and I think this idea of employees getting their time back, being able to spend time on strategic work. And I think, look, I'm excited for all the possibility, and I hope with financial services that people don't, they are willing to try things, and it doesn't get all, too overly regulated and prevents the innovation from helping out these companies.
So with that, I'm afraid we're out of time. Please join me in a warm thank you for our three panelists, Erica Libby, Jenny Johnston, and Seema Amble. Thank you.